Welcome, sinners. I'm Jason,
And I'm Rebecca, also known as Emily Sin.
and this is the Sanctuary of Sin podcast. We will cover everything delectably sinful, from kink and queer culture to cults, sex positivity, and everything in between.
Let's get sinful. For today's topic, we're going to be discussing the power of women, historical memes, and the battle for the trousers. Actually, how I got onto this originally was seeing a TikTok video like months and months ago where a girl was discussing like depictions of the philosopher Aristotle being ridden by what she was saying was his wife, and that the fact that his wife was like his dominatrix.
All right.
And I was like, I've never heard this before. Like, this is like well up my street. I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need to fact check this and have a look into it and see what the chat is, because obviously interested. And just uncovered this full thing that I ended up going on like a massive like rabbit hole and looking into. Yeah, I was a bit disappointed because it turned out to be bullshit, but it did lead into this like kind of journey that I've been on, looking into like why there were so many depictions of this one particular image, like across, so like it's been made out of gold, it's been carved into ivory, like it's been carved in big massive like full wall sized like wooden structures. Like, it's an image that has popped up so much and so often and in so many different mediums and stuff as well, that I thought it was worth doing an episode on a bit about why that is and how this was essentially a meme back in the day, and how it was only one of so many different kind of images like this that existed at the time that were like kind of depicting this, like, depending on who you spoke to and where in the culture it was being kind of shown, because it was everybody had this, do you know, for like the lower classes all the way up through. Like, it was something that kind of dominated every space. Like, it wasn't specific to like one subsect of the culture. It was like, it was just this kind of cultural phenomenon type of thing.
Aye, like how memes are nowadays.
Yeah,
but
literally.
Through what they had at the time.
Yeah.
Rather than social media, it was trinkets and paintings and carvings and things.
Yeah. Aye, depending on who you spoke to, it was either like a warning or like a declaration of love. It was like satire, it was poking fun at the church. The church was using them to pure get done with the kids and like using them for their own kind of rhetoric. Like, it's so interesting.
I mean, we see that nowadays with memes being co-opted by all different groups and used for kind of for their own purposes.
Yep.
And to further their own narratives and stuff.
And most of them in the beginning were working the depictions of like what was essentially like historical fan fictions, where people were like taking their favourite like either like heroes or like stories of the Bible, like people from the Bible, people feel like these big romance epics, so like the kind of medieval, you know, like the knights and the princesses, like as well as like kind of antiquity and like current history, and depicting them in these scenarios to kind of tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
Or to like have an image to go along with the story. So we're not sure if like Phyllis actually existed, the woman who was riding Aristotle. It certainly wasn't his wife, but we'll come into that
okay.
a bit later on, when we tell like the kind of full story of what the chat with that was. But most of the time these stories were kind of made up to showcase a certain kind of power that women had over men.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be like them seducing them or tricking them or poisoning them, or like to some extent they were very much showing that women were the dominant ones.
Yeah.
And all these different types of relationships that existed.
Like behind every great man.
There's a yeah, literally. I think that's like where that kind of, or I probably wouldn't be fair to say like that's where that comes from, but it was certainly what this was trying to show.
Yeah.
Case essentially. So there was different names for these kind of groups of images, because this was a phenomenon not only in like the UK but like across the full of Europe, particularly in Germany. So we have like Minnesklaven, love slaves, Manner to heat. I do not speak German, so if that was terribly wrong, I apologise. The folly of men, or Weberlisten, the tricks of women. I think they also show as well, like during the time period where these were popular, which was around like 300-400 years, like they lasted quite a while.
That's
quite
impressive, actually.
Yeah, they morphed and changed over time, like memes tend to do, but yeah, they were very much a part of popular culture, like kind of coming into like the Renaissance kind of period and the Enlightenment, when like secularization was occurring, so like the kind of movement away from more kind of traditional like religion, and at that point the vast majority of art like tended to be religious in nature, or have some sort of like religious connotation attached to it. So these were like some of the first things that people chose to depict, some of which were still religious, but some of the stories weren't. So it's quite interesting that this kind of goes hand in hand with the movement away from the church. And I think that's why it wouldn't be fair to take these as only warnings, because there's a few different, like,
they're kind of coming from a few different sources with different
like kind of meanings behind them.
Aye.
Yeah, like one of the ways that was quite popular for them to be shown was on like trinkets and like jewellery boxes, and were quite often given as gifts from like a man to a woman to show his devotion for her. So there was this kind of this other side to them where it was, God, do you know what, actually this stuff is true, like I'd do anything for you kind of thing.
Yeah, almost as a sort of like show of like love and respect.
Yeah.
That like I understand that you have more power than like the church says you do, kind of thing.
So the church at the time still very much had this narrative that like love of the flesh was secondary to love of God. Like you should love God more than you love like your husband, your wife, your family. Like that was still very like much something, like a tree that they were barking up at the time. Which is why a lot of these images are actually still today like found in carvings on like church choir stalls and like different parts of different churches, especially in Germany. There's quite a lot of German churches that have still got fucking Phyllis ridden Aristotle like carved into like the seats and stuff like that. Because this was showing like the folly of a man in love with a woman, and that like this is what happens when you're godless and you
love women more than you love God. And
it turns you into an idiot, basically.
Yeah, it leaves you open to be tricked. And
this was the interpretation that the church were very much trying to like push on people, to the point that they actually commissioned these works to be. There were some other like biblical stories that were included, but weirdly the Phyllis and Aristotle one's the one that I've seen the most in churches.
Yeah.
I think it's just quite a striking image. Like it leaves very little room to take it, like to not understand what's going on.
Yeah.
You can take it in different ways, but to see that image, it's quite obvious who wears the trousers in that relationship. There's also a lot of depictions in churches of the kind of the later style. So because this spans so long, in the first kind of like 100, 200 years, it was specifically like these big, like easily identifiable characters from like stories, history, the Bible that were depicted. And they kind of came from all different walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
So you had like Aristotle as your kind of intellectual figure.
Yeah.
You had Samson from the Bible as your kind of like powerful, like
sort of strong man
kind of style like figure. You had Virgil, who was this like really famous poet for Roman, like ancient Rome, who wrote all these kind of epics about like the creation of Rome and stuff. So you're kind of like your arts were being covered with him. Tristan and his old, for this kind of like knights, like gallantry, courageous kind of figure. So they were kind of covering all these different kind of sects of what was at the time seen as like how to morally be a good man. These were the kind of,
these were like the desirable traits, and this was how each of these different men kind of met his downfall because of women
in some form
relating to that
particular So nobody was safe.
Yeah.
Like if all these great men could be corrupted, so could anybody, was the kind of the line. Like no like moral
it sort of shows that, like, you know, an intellectual man is not above this kind of being corrupted, and neither is like a strong and brave man, and like that they all have
this
the
thing
possibility
in common.
of this weakness.
Yeah, they all have this weakness in common. So that was the kind of early, that was the start. That was like the OG memes were these kind of pillars of like masculinity and in its different forms, and how they were all subject to like the wiles of women.
And was this primarily coming out of the church then at this point?
So it was everywhere. So these were like stories first, and people heard the stories and liked them. And it's hard to say like where they showed up first. They were showing up everywhere at the same time. It was just that the church was also,
they got on board quite quickly and co-opted
what they attributed the message of them to be. Do you know, it's one of these, it's like, where do memes come from? Where did they start? Like, it's very much in a similar fashion, which is why, like, I think it's a really good comparison, in that it was something that was created by somebody at some point, but there's no real way to trace it back, because it just cottoned on, and then they were popping up everywhere, and people were adding their own flares to them. Their own wee bits and pieces were getting changed over the time. The stories were getting changed over the time. Do you know, there's a lot of different versions of them, and a lot of different kind of depictions to match. But as what happens with everything over time, do you know, it started changing, it started kind of getting more personalised, it started being just everyday figures that were shown in these situations. And these depictions, which is what I find wild, can also be found carved in churches and different kind of mediums,
the ones
as well.
With like kind of everyday people. Right.
So you'll have like a woman beating her assumedly husband over the head with like a broom or a club, just like carved into the seats. Like another, like, one of the main kind of symbols that became known for like this kind of second half of these depictions was like them fighting over a pair of trousers.
Yeah.
Was a really, really common one, where like the husband would be like trying to reach for them, and like the wife's like battering them with like a candlestick or something. So they kind of, this second half kind of became kind of colloquially known as the Battle of the Trousers. They also showed the men serving the women as like cart horses, outwitting them at cards and chess, or leading them around with like leashes and like collars on their necks. So getting into some quite kind of BDSM-y style looking scenes.
Yeah.
Especially like the cart horses as well. That's quite like a...
Yeah.
But I think the cart horses one in particular, there was quite like the kind of moral philosophy at that time was quite focused on like how men were different from beasts. So this is like another kind of wee bit to the Aristotle and Phyllis one, where like her putting him in a like position where he was like no more than a beast,
Yeah.
like had more meaning attached to it then as well, because this was kind of like a hot topic at the time. Like it had an extra like kind of punch to it that is maybe lost to us a wee bit now.
Aye. I think this is the trouble when you're dealing with stuff like this old that was like, popular culture that was like stories that went along with images, as you lose quite a bit of the nuance.
Yeah.
If somebody in a couple of 100 years was to look back at memes from today with no context, I think they would probably really struggle to pick up on like the nuance and the meaning behind what's going on.
Yeah. Even now, if there's like, it's quite easy to see a meme and it just be totally lost on you if you don't have the context of what was surrounding it.
If you're not part of the sort of
the chain reaction,
the in group, or
yeah,
the kind of the subculture,
yeah,
that's the origin that originates from.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just a case of missing a link in the chain as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when memes like take on attributes for other memes and they kind of like grow like that? Like if you miss one and then you see the one after, sometimes you can be at a loss of like where that shifts came in.
Yeah.
Like it's interesting thinking about that in like a historical perspective.
Yeah.
So the story of Aristotle and Phyllis kind of became well known during the kind of 13th century, which is where these images kind of started popping up, through the poems of the French troubadour Henry d'Andely. So the story kind of originates in Arabia, where the Sultan's vizier let a beautiful woman seduce and ride him. And then during the kind of 13th century, the works of Aristotle were being translated and kind of distributed across kind of India and Arabia, which led to the story being adapted and changed to be about Aristotle and Phyllis. And this through probably loads of mediums, but particularly this French troubadour kind of made its way through Europe.
Yeah.
Which was the kind of influence for them starting to draw it and carve it and depict it. Aristotle was the advisor of Alexander the Great.
All right. Yeah.
So in this story, Alexander's, it's sometimes his wife or his lover was Phyllis, who kind of demanded like as much time and attention from Alexander as she could get.
Yeah.
And because of that, he's starting to kind of like neglect his affairs, because he's spending too much time with his wife / lover, which leads kind of Aristotle to give him a row and be like, mate, come on, like you can't just spend all your time with this bird. You've got to rule your kingdom. Like shit needs done.
Yeah.
And he kind of warns them against this kind of dangerous influence of both love and women being this kind of corrupting factor.
Like
it's
a
just getting in the road,
from
a distraction.
Yeah.
Aye. So upon hearing this, Phyllis is like, fuck you to Aristotle, and decides to kind of take revenge on him by seducing him and making him no more than a beast.
Yeah.
So she lets her hair down and kind of goes to the window of his study and starts kind of dancing in a sexy manner at him.
Yep.
While he watches from the window. At which point he totally succumbs to this. He's like
naturally
head over heels for her, and confesses his love to her. And she's like, cool, bro, but you need to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
So she convinces him that he needs to go down on his hands and knees and be her horse for the day.
Right.
And he jumps at the chance to prove his love for her.
Mm-hmm.
So down he goes, she saddles him up, puts a bridle on him, and sits on his back. She grabs the reins and rides him around in circles in the garden. But unbeknownst to him, she's invited Alexander to come and watch this. So she kind of humiliates him in front of his kind of tutor.
Yeah.
And kind of shows up the teachings that he's bestowed upon Alexander, because he's doing the exact thing he's warned him not to do. And it kind of shows how like the love and charms of a woman can like show up even the most kind of incorruptible like source, essentially. And it was really popular within Christian sermons at the time. So the kind of church took this story and ran with it. To kind of show an example of how like worldly wisdom is beneath love and the pecking order. Like even wisdom's not enough to kind of keep you safe, essentially. To become a slave of like animal instincts and
just a way to kind of show that there's nothing out there that beats like devotion to God. And
well, no, it was shown that wisdom's not enough to save you from like the confines of like sorry,
but the kind of only thing that is going to be enough
to
is
save
this
you. Aye.
devotion to God and loving God first and foremost.
Aye, they're creating a problem and then showing you the solution, basically. Aye, there's this other part to it as well. Like we've kind of touched on this a wee bit. Like Aristotle seen women as like unfinished men. Like he's seen them as like the lowest of the low. Like what was it? There was a specific word that he used. Like he's seen them as like broken men, basically. Like he's seen them as like no fully human, essentially. So using him in this example and in this story, like again, has this extra kind of punch to it. That
it was almost like a sort of double humiliation.
Yeah.
Not only is he sort of fallible in his wisdom, like that's not been enough to save him, but it's not been enough to save him from someone that he sees as like beneath him and like less than him.
Yeah. Oh, lesser man. That was it. Yeah. Aye, so like to him, women were created to submit, and that was something he was very, very vocal about. So turning that story directly on its head kind of shows there's like this kind of satirical element to it. Like even if the church was taking this as like straight up fact to like use as a warning, like within popular culture there was this kind of like wee bit of giggle to it, because it was kind of poking fun at this kind of long like existing like moral concept of women being less than men. Like it just had this wee like cheeky like ho like something you're not supposed to talk about like bit to it in a way. Which is why I think it got so popular in the sense that it did. Like it wouldn't have just been the kind of church's version that was making it like popular with like travelling troubadours, and you know, like it had this kind of comedic like element to it. Like this image was quite a popular one on like ivory jewellery boxes of noble ladies, as this kind of like nod to like who was really in control as well. Like even though it was one of the older kind of adages of this concept, it still had this kind of wink wink nudge nudge kind of like quality to it of women using it as like an empowering like symbol even at that time. As a way of like kind of bolstering their confidence and their ability to then go out and like subdue men for their own means, which, do you know, you needed to fucking date to survive back then. That like it's hardly, I find it difficult to look at something as deceitful when it's been a means to like being able to exist in a sense. Like
in a world that was so hostile towards women, this like kind of act of resistance and this like sort of symbol of like hope, essentially, that like you know, we do have a place in this world, and we can be influential, and it's maybe not in the same way as men, but like we
hold
do
all
have
the power.
we do have some amount of control in this.
It was also quite like a popular image in kind of town halls, because it was like this warning to like counsellors and people who were kind of like rulers of cities from falling in love and like the kind of consequences of that, and that even like the kind of oldest and cleverest men like aren't safe from it. Like you can't think that you're above this. Was the kind of message that was kind of trying to convey. There's even like a medallion with an image of Aristotle and Phyllis on a tapestry in the town hall of Regensburg in Germany, with an adage underneath it where it says, the translation being, a stupid woman is riding a clever man, to show that like it wasn't smarts or intelligence that kind of tricked him. Like it was just her womanly ways. Like it was just her body. Like it wasn't anything that she held. So there's this kind of like there was probably a million different ways that this was taken, depending on like what it was being used for. But I find it quite interesting that within the kind of like intellectual quote unquote like side of society, it was very much this like they've added their own take on it, as it being that she was stupid. This wasn't like a smart thing that she'd done.
It was almost like not quite accidental, but like it was done with no intentionality and no sort of like necessarily planning or thought behind it. It was just a sort of like kind of like a base instinct sort of.
Aye, like there was no skill involved in this, which I think is unfair. Like
same. I think it takes. You know, quite a smart person to identify somebody else's like weaknesses and be able to use that against them,
be
and
able to carry it out in such like a hilarious fashion, is what like it worked so well. Do you know? So the kind of second most kind of popular depictions within churches and stuff was the Samson and Delilah story. I've heard the Samson. I've heard the like, do you know, like I'm being really strong and almost being kind of like Hercules, but like the Bible Hercules.
Yeah.
But not like anything else other than that, really.
Right.
So Samson fell in love with Delilah, and the rulers of the Philistines, who were kind of trying to take him out, went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." So they were trying to like convince her to like trick him so that they could take him down. Because everything that they had been trying up until this point had failed. And they were like, we've got him now, lads. So I'll not go through the full thing because three times she asked him what his weakness was, how she could tie him up and subdue him.
Yeah.
And 3 times he told her a lie. So he told her different things, and at each point she did the thing he said, tied him up, and then brought the Philistines in to get him and was like, "Oh no, Samson, the Philistines are here," and he would just like burst out of whatever the thing was and like go and get them.
Yeah.
And then on the 4th time, and after every time, she'd be like, "Why are you lying to me? Do you not trust me? Like what? Like you've made a fool of me. Tell me how you can be tied." And on the final time, he was like, "No razor has ever been used on my head. Because I have been a Nazarite dedicated to God from my mother's womb, if my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." At which point, she tied him up, shaved his head, and then he got by the Philistines. and they took him to prison and made him grind grain. But then I think his hair grew back and he was fine. So he still got away in the end. But
This is a story I remember from church as a child.
oh right.
Yeah.
I just don't remember like any of my childhood. So it's gone. I probably heard it as well, but yeah.
Yeah, nah, I remember this one. I don't really know what the point in it was, other than women are bad.
Yeah. I think that
sneaky.
is the kind of moral of the story, but to me, how sneaky is getting caught 3 times? Like, surely this is like a fool me once style story to me, where like Samson's the fucking idiot in this story.
Aye.
Like, 4 times is a lot of times to get caught out by the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I think maybe it wasn't obvious to him that she was the person bringing the Philistines in every time. But surely that would be a bit suspicious to you. Surely you would start like questioning what was going on.
I certainly would be questioning it.
Was he just like a big, strong, like ugga bugga guy and no a thought in his head? Like,
I think so. I think that's kind of what I take away from it, is that like it was all bronze and no brains.
Yeah.
Like,
but so one of the kind of Powery Women series is the depiction of her like shaving his head.
Yeah.
It's quite like a common kind of visual within this as well, and quite a common one in churches because it's coming from a biblical story. Oh, I missed out the bit where they gouged out his eyes.
Samson's eyes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Aye. It was a very long time ago. I don't necessarily remember the details.
Yeah.
I do just remember it being a story, like hearing about it at Sunday school as a child.
Yeah.
But
I love how I was like, oh, he was fine. He just went to jail and then grew his hair back and he was strong again. But no, he had no eyes.
yeah. Got to be some sort of like lifelong great loss caused by trusting a woman.
Yeah.
Otherwise, how would he have learned his lesson?
Exactly. I mean, I feel like the first 3 times that happened gave him plenty chance to learn his lesson, but sometimes it just takes your eyes getting gouged out, I guess. Aye, so this again was showing, like, this kind of great, strong, like, infallible man with, like, these amazing characteristics that everybody could look up to. This hero being taken down by the kind of, like, the evil woman, the corruptible woman, do you know? But I'd like to hear her side of the story.
Aye.
I don't think that was in the Bible, though. Within the church, these were very much used as kind of fables, as warnings, as kind of proof that, like, God's love should conquer, like, kind of love of the flesh or love of, like, your wife, essentially. And that it was the kind of answer and the saviour of that, because all these other things weren't enough to save them.
Aye, because in that example there, if he'd just maintained his love of God above all else and hadn't loved and trusted her,
Yep.
then he'd have been fine.
Yep. Because at that point, like, God had abandoned him because he shaved his hair. So, like, and telling her he had, like, betrayed God, essentially. Yeah. Aye, so all these work at the kind of, like, darkerish side of the Powery women. But often the kind of the domination of women over men was quite kind of gracefully portrayed. There was a kind of romanticised version of, do you know, this was like the kind of medieval area, so there was a lot of like knights and knights of the round table and like all these kind of like big epic romance stories were quite popular at the time and kind of made their way into the Powery women as well, which led to them being these kind of tokens of love and devotion, and can be seen on anything for like hairbrushes and like trinket dishes and jewellery boxes and stuff that were clearly gifts.
Yeah.
And these showcase both a kind of one of the kind of traditional ones that of Tristan and Isolde that we'll cover in a wee second, to more kind of just everyday portrayals of like men like willingly bearing like their chest to like get like an arrow to like save a woman.
Yeah.
Or like just being down on their knees and kind of offering them tokens of adoration and stuff. And these can be seen on like tapestries and like ivory mirrors, and these were all like quite commonly given as gifts at the time.
Yeah.
One of the famous examples of this is Tristan and Isolde, or Isolde. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. But this one comes from Ireland, which is pretty cool. So Tristan travels to Ireland on a mission for his uncle, King Mark of Cornwall.
Yep.
He is told to propose a marriage between Mark and Isolde. I'm going to go with Isolde. That sounds a bit more kind of Irish, do you think? You have no idea?
No idea.
So while he's in Ireland, he slays a dragon that's been plaguing the Irish people, and they're happy to agree to this kind of marriage request based on like the fact that he's just saved all the people.
Yeah.
Quite a heroic kind of typical story. So picks up Isolde along with a love potion to make sure that she's going to fall in love with the king, which is a bit less heroic. That's a bit creepy and consent gross, but yeah. There is a couple of different versions of this story. In some, the princess has the love potion that she's going to give to the king. In some, she slips this love potion to Tristan because she doesn't want to marry the king. There is a couple of different kind of versions that probably suited, again, different needs. But in this particular one, the Irish people have packed up Isolde and this love potion with her to give to the king, or to ensure she'll fall in love with the king, sorry.
Right.
So on their way back to Cornwall, Tristan and the princess take the love potions. In some versions, this is accidental. In others, Isolde quietly slips the potion in Tristan's drink. And they fall madly in love. So they've betrayed the king at this point.
Yeah.
And they kind of run off together and get married in secret. Even though they kind of know their relationship's really dangerous. And this is where a lover's tryst has roots.
Right.
Is from his name Tristan. This is the kind of like origin story that's saying, because they've kind of ran off in secret.
That's fascinating.
Which is pretty cool. This was massive at the time. This was like this was probably the most popular of all these kind of big like romance knight and princess and dragons kind of epics. So the king is plagued by dreams of them running off together in quite a kind of prophetic nature, and attempts to catch them and kind of find proof of their guilt, which he does, and sentences them both to death. Isolde by burning at the stake, and Tristan by hanging. But on his way to the execution, Tristan breaks free of the guards, leaps from a chapel, and rescues Isolde, and the lovers flee to the forest of Morose. The king eventually finds them, but kind of feels bad for them because they've been like on the run and hiding for so long. So instead, like, it's like, cool, I'll just take Isolde as my queen, and like, as long as Tristan fucks off and like leaves us alone. And kind of gives him a different wife, like far away. So that he goes off in peace and kind of lives his life. He kind of continues his nightly duties over in Brittany, but is wounded by a poisoned lance while trying to rescue a damsel in distress, held by 6 other knights. And as he lays dying, desperately calls for Isolde, and his wife's fucking raging that it's Isolde he's calling out for instead of her,
Fair enough.
but still sends for her anyway. And they kind of watch the waters for like a messenger ship to see if she's gonna like come back, come out to save him. They've told them like if Isolde's aboard to fly a white sail, so that they know that she's on the way. If she's refused to come, the sail will be black.
Right.
Wait, is his new wife called Isolde as well? Just to be extra confusing. Yep. So it's his new wife, who's also called Isolde, who spots the ship flying a white flag, coming in to the shore, and jealous and angry, she tells Tristan that the sail's black. At which point Tristan kills his sail.
All right. Yep.
So when Isolde number 1 arrives, she finds she's too late and consequently kills herself and dies next to Tristan's dead body and joins him in death. So
a kind of bit of Romeo and Juliet story on the go
well,
here.
this predates Romeo and Juliet, so it's probably been, it's been an influence of that. I can't believe his second wife's called Isolde as well. I wonder, it must be her that's getting shown in The Powery Woman, and for some of them then. This is just one version of the story. In other ones, they both survive and live happily ever after. But I think this
probably
one,
depending on the message that people are trying to put across.
Exactly. As when, they didn't have the internet back then. Like barely anybody could even fucking read or write. So these all would have been told like spoken word, place to place, and also being translated if they started like,
it's like a game of telephone where what you get at the end is not necessarily anywhere near how it started.
Aye. Especially if this kind of started in Ireland but then became really, really popular in France. The translation across as well, it's aye. But depictions of Tristan and Isolde were really, really common, and tapestries and all these more like love tokeny side of. But because there is this like female betrayal like aspect to it, they're still very much included within The Powery Woman, and still showing the downfalls that love can give.
Yeah. It's like by trusting his new wife, he, by trusting her and her lying to him, he thought there was no hope left, and it's. But you can also see how there's one of the sort of like negative ways that this could have been spun was in the beginning. If the first Isolde was supposed to be getting married to the king, but then through spending time with Tristan has fallen in love with him.
Yep.
It's this kind of story of, don't let your women spend time with other men.
Yep.
Like,
aye, don't let love interfere with your duty.
Yeah.
Where she's slipped him the love potion as well. There's like even this like courageous, like he can kill dragons, but like a woman can take him down in the matter of seconds.
Yeah.
Aye, there's layers to this. There's layers to this with the layers of versions of them as well. But it's quite nice that even despite all that, the kind of overarching message of this and where it's been used mostly has been this like love conquers all, like, showcasing the devotion shown in the story and being
Yeah.
like, this is how much I love you, which is like really nice. Like it's nice that it's been taken that way the most.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's quite cool how some of these can be taken as like quite rather than them like warning against women, kind of warning against like men mistreating women and like the consequences of what happens if you fuck around and find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I think they've played quite a good like way, maybe keeping women safe in a sense.
Yeah.
And that it's like, don't underestimate the potentials of people. Like, don't like treat them with fucking love, dignity, and respect, or this is what could happen to you.
Aye, that's sort of like a cautionary tale for men.
Yep.
Like, just you behave.
Aye. Just you watch what you're doing. And I think that's like one of the other reasons why they've been so popular as well, is that like women have kind of like, again, like been quite like empowered by, I don't know if empowered is the right word here, like quite kind of like vindicated and like seen in a sense.
Yeah.
And that, you know, it's showing that despite like centuries of women being seen as the weaker sex and something to be like kind of put on a pedestal and protected and like kind of infantilized in a way, or like at least being seen as that, like that they actually have their own autonomy, they actually have their own thoughts and feelings and motives and like reasons for like behaving in the ways that they do.
Yeah.
And that it's not just like, oh, silly empty-headed woman who's submissive. Like, it's shown this like
they're clever and they're capable and you should respect them.
Aye. And like dominant women exist.
Mm-hmm.
And dominant women are powerful, and they're powerful enough to even subdue like all these famous figures. There's this kind of flip side to it where like it's almost glorifying like the power of women over men.
Yeah, yeah.
As opposed to kind of vilifying it. And
like you men think you're so great, but in reality, women can be greater than the greatest of men.
Aye. Like, I don't know that was its original intention, especially with, like, do you know, a lot of the kind of, like, the gender norms and, like, the kind of views that society had on women and on morality. I mean, we weren't far away from, like, we were leading up to the witch trials at this point.
Yeah.
Do you know, I'm not in any way saying that this was necessarily, like, a common interpretation. But the fact that these images were things that were found on such everyday objects that were used by women, at least I don't think it would be unfair to say that a lot of women seen these stories
it can
in that
certainly
light.
be looked at that way.
And held it as this kind of personal power, kind of like reaffirmer in a sense. So upon first look, I thought Virgil in the basket, which is the kind of fourth kind of major like image of this set, was quite a good kind of representation of this, because I found it was so long before I managed to find the full story.
Right.
It's an image that, you know, in all the like the art gallery websites, all the kind of university websites that I had a look at that were like kind of showing the artworks and then given like a description of, I found no mention of the second half of the Virgil in the basket story until I came across somebody's like website that was about all like Spanish culture and different aspects of Spanish culture, and was writing about like the Spanish depictions of the Virgil in the basket story, and then gave the full story, the second half of it, which has just been so like sanitized and just deleted from kind of modern like descriptions of of the power of women,
Yeah.
like kind of art and stuff. I find it wild. Like, I don't understand how like educational facilities can just delete portions of history like that.
It's not great, but it does happen. It probably happens more than we'd like to think.
So I will be telling the full story of Virgil in the basket. I mean, it's quite a short story. It's not like they've took it out because they had a limited amount of characters to use. But anyway, so Virgil, the poet, as I said, was like this kind of famous Roman poet who wrote all these kind of epics and epic poems about Rome and the beginning of Rome. But also wrote a poem about the folly of a man who was kind of a slave to unrequited love.
Right.
And was kind of humiliated by this. And this is what's kind of led to Virgil being cast in his own story as this man, and depicted as such. So he fell in love with a woman and pursued her constantly. He wanted to meet up for them to have sex, and he just wouldn't leave the poor lassie alone. So eventually she was like, right, cool, I'll meet you in this tower. If you pop in this basket, I'll pull you up and we'll meet in the tower and we'll have some rumpy pumpy. And instead she pulled him up halfway and then tied the basket off and left him trapped overnight. So that in the morning when everybody got up, like he was still there.
And they
like,
could see, yeah.
And this kind of public humiliation, kind of style, like everybody was buckled at him and thought he was like the biggest idiot ever. The second half of this story is how he then achieved revenge on the woman.
All right.
So this is the kind of thing that's just no mentioned at all that I can find. But I've seen pictures of it, so I know this is part of the story.
Yeah.
Because some of the depictions show this second half.
But they just don't discuss it. This is the...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So when he eventually got done, somebody must have felt bad for him and finally let him down at his basket, wee sod. And he went around all of Rome and extinguished every fire he could find. And no fires could be relit unless they used the private parts of this woman. So they were like shoving all the torches and shit up her fanny to like relight them.
Oh.
Of the full of Rome.
Right.
I
mean that feels like going a bit overboard.
It's a bit far. I don't feel like the punishment fit the crime. Nah,
especially because he was being like a bit of a creep and just wouldn't take no for an answer.
Exactly. So there are depictions of this woman having multiple objects inserted in her that are kind of... I don't know that they ever made it into any of the churches that I could find, but certainly Virgil in the basket is one that is still seen through all these different kind of mediums that I'd mentioned before. Mostly just with a tower, him hanging halfway down, and everybody like pointing and laughing and just being like absolutely like thinking it was like the funniest thing gone. And I feel like without the second half of the story, it is quite like a good kind of cautionary tale on like what could happen to you if you don't like respect others' fucking like rights and stuff.
Yeah.
But upon discovering the second half, it's quite fucking grim.
Look, that's not the behaviour of some like a right thinking person.
No, in any way. And although I probably should have, I didn't go and read Virgil's poem, and it would be interesting to see if that was exactly how it played out in said poem, or if this was just kind of added for like flourish, or if indeed it was added in certain like how there's different versions with all the other depictions depending on who you're asking and what they're trying to what message they're trying to convey. I wonder if this second half is one that's only specific to people that were kind of trying to show the kind of hostile side of men loving women rather than the kind of accepting side of it.
I mean, I certainly prefer to choose to look at this as like the sort of empowering way to look at women, and that, you know, they have more power, they are smarter, they're kind of more autonomous than men like to think, and just you be careful.
Yep. I really like the kind of. There's not been enough research done on this. Just like, you know, so much of this has kind of had to be our personal opinion, and like I'm not an art historian. You know, like this is kind of like, as much as this is a topic that I've found fascinating, there's just no a lot to work from in terms of like. There's been one American woman who has done the vast majority of the work on looking at this. Susan L. Smith has done the vast majority of work surrounding this. There has been quite a few other German authors that have also done work, but unfortunately, as far as I could find, their works have not been translated and are behind a multitude of paywalls that I didn't want to go through in case they weren't then translated.
Yeah.
Certainly the versions that I found were in German, so like, yeah.
But with this being art, it is subjective.
Exactly.
It is open to interpretation.
And I think having an awareness of like a lot of the culture and stuff at the time, which is something that is I'm fairly interested and invested in finding out. Like, I don't think it's unfair of us to kind of pool our knowledge on that and kind of make, in essence, educated guesses about what was going on. And through that, like, I think why this had so many interpretations was that this was such like a strange time, and that the church had been very much like a dominant influence over culture, society, art especially, and their kind of waning power and influence during this period led to just a lot of creativity, a lot of like kind of newfound freedoms that people didn't have before. And like, I think it's not unfair to make that leap that a lot of this was very satirical and poking fun at the church, and in essence poking fun at like the gender norms that the church had upheld. You know, one of their biggest fucking things at the time was like women's submission to men and women's like place within society and place within the home. And like, I feel like through showing all these, albeit made up examples, but very possible examples, and also using the church's own like kind of they were using these as like fables, as stories to teach with. So the church believed in them. Like, it was quite funny that they kind of were in total like opposition to what the church was teaching as like natural at the time, to the point that like some of the later works into like the Battle of the Trousers, where it was more kind of just everyday people, there are still kind of depictions within them of like demons telling the woman what to do while she's like trying to grapple for the trousers. And like, there's just this satirical, as I've said, like kind of element throughout it all that does lead me to believe a lot of it was making fun of the church and making fun of the kind of gender like norms that were being upheld within that. Like, I think it was quite like a safe way for people while things were fresh and, you know, they weren't quite sure if like the secularization was going to like become entire, like the church still had power and influence,
a fad, or whether it was going to actually take root and kind of be a long lasting
it was quite like a safe, almost undercover way of like being anti-church
Yeah,
without.
it starts kind of spreading this kind of just eroding the authority of the church by poking fun and, letting people know that you don't always necessarily have to be on board with everything the church has got to say.
Yeah.
There is, you can, by having a wee joke about, this, this silly story that they want us to believe. Here's a different version of it that you could take a different way.
Yeah. And I think the thing that kind of like proves that even further for me is the fact that it was such like a common like piece in like troubadours and like traveling kind of like theatre troupes and stuff like that. It was like a popular thing for them to showcase, and they traditionally were always satirical. They were always kind of challenging authority, like poking fun at things to the point like a lot of them got in trouble all the fucking time for it.
Yeah.
So like the fact that they were using this subject matter just like makes that more a concrete theory for me.
Yeah.
But it's open to your interpretation. If you guys have enjoyed this, let us know your thoughts. Let us know what you think. Yeah, I think that is about us.
All right.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Thanks for joining us, you filthy little sinners. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
We're keeping this podcast deliciously ad-free, so if you want to support what we do, head over to our Patreon and join our Church of Sin.
If you're craving some new personally recommended kink gear, check out our website, thesanctuaryofsin.com, for all your naughty needs, and use the code SINPOD at checkout for a 15% discount.
Got ideas, feedback, or just want to tell us what made you blush? We'd love to hear from you.
You can find all our socials, including Instagram, Twitter, and FetLife, on our Linktree, which is linktree/thesanctuaryofsin. Thank you for sinning with us.
And don't forget to tune in next time for our next confession.